Ryan, you're on mute.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Al and I go back a long way. I've known Alan since high school, so I thought this would be a perfect person to start to see if it works for us. And I'm sure Al has some jabs at me, so just don't believe a word he says on that and on those issues. All right. Al is an MATPMP, captain of Stark County Unit 3. He'll be speaking on Ohio search and rescue scenarios and operations conducted in Northeast Ohio by Ohio Special Response Team and other organizations, as well as recent hurricane incidents. He says, bring your compass and wear your life jacket. Al Plastow has a master's degree from Kent State University. He developed and currently teaches a certification in applied project management at the University of Akron. Prior to partial retirement, Al established the first global credentialing training program in technological portfolio management. Wow. He's certified in land search and rescue through the National Search and Rescue School operated by the U.S. Air Force and Coast Guard. Search and Rescue Technician 2 by the National Association for Search and Rescue. Search Team Leader by the Mountain Rescue Association. F2209 Land Search and Rescue by ASTM International. His SAR team is FEMA Qualified National Deployment. Disaster Response Team of Northeastern Ohio has deployed to Louise River Basin, North Carolina for Hurricane Florence and Lake Charles. Louisiana for Hurricanes Laura and Delta. He's also responded in 2011 with Team Rubicon to Susquehanna River flash flood disaster in Pennsylvania. He's telling me I had half an hour, but man, this took at least half of that. Anyway, Al Plastow, take it away.
Al, you'll have to unmute.
Thanks.
Hit the microphone.
Can you unmute, Al? I can unmute you, okay.
You'll have to hit the microphone, Al.
How's that, guys?
There you go.
Sometimes I can do these things.
Hey,
All right. Now you got my screen?
Yes, I do.
Whoa.
They can't hear you. I mean, they're all muted.
Have it?
Yeah.
Are we good to go?
Yes.
All right. Hey, Al Plastow. I work with search and rescue, and it can be an extremely interesting activity. You mentioned in one of the discussions just now that you should try something new. Well, I tried something new, and here it is. I'm showing up at things like this. This is one of the scenes from Houston, from Hurricane Harvey. And if you look at the picture, there are 3 people in yellow raincoats and 1 military vehicle. All the rest of those people in that picture are search and rescue people. They're volunteers, spontaneous volunteers, and unaffiliated volunteers. There's another image.
Don't see the picture, Al.
What's that?
I don't see a picture.
You don't see my picture?
I don't see a picture. I see you.
Well, Bill Gates said that you can see my picture. Hang in there a minute. We'll share the screen again. How about now?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Now wait, let's try it again. How about now?
Yes.
Good. All right, so here's the picture. This is Houston during Hurricane Harvey. A lot of search and rescue people, a lot of different kinds of craft that they're using, and it gets pretty crazy from there. We do a lot of different things in search and rescue. As you can see, I'm assuming you're looking at a picture of 2 people walking a boat full of survivors.
Yes.
Cool. Survivors, animals, people, anyone, anything that gets through, we can rescue. This is a flash flood. This is Ellicott, Pennsylvania. They built the city on a essentially right alongside a riverbank and then they blacktopped and concreted everything around the city, and they've had like 4 massive flash floods, the 500-year floods, just in the past several years. When I say 500-year floods, it's supposed to only happen once every 500 years. In the United States, 500-year flooding has been occurring every single year for the past 5 or 6 years. We pick up animals as well as people. These two actually swam their way to the rescue truck. Here's one of the things we run into quite a bit. During flooding, nobody ever thinks about the gas lines or the propane tanks. Well, what you see bubbling in this particular picture is 3, and there's actually about 10 of them in this overall picture. This is just kind of a close-up. But that's explosive gas coming up out of the water into the atmosphere, and hopefully you have the sense not to drive a boat through that area. This is hurricane. Go ahead. This is the hurricane in Louisiana recently, and this is an image of a train blown off the tracks by the wind. Again, Louisiana, and there are actually 4 trailers in this picture. The one up close on the left-hand side has rolled twice into the second one, and towards the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the upside-down framework of another trailer that rolled into the 4th one. These were all occupied at the time. When we go into an area like this, we have to find the people inside and get them out. It's another trailer that was out in an open field, and it is literally obliterated. There is just plain nothing left. Fortunately, these people weren't in residence at the time. This is downtown Lake Charles. If you go on YouTube, you can actually get a video watching the windows on this building blow out during the actual hurricane itself. It's a pretty scary thing. Hopefully there weren't a lot of people inside that building at the time, because the wind literally blew in one side and right out to the other side. Lake Charles again in Louisiana. A telephone pole snapped off, and the top 2 cross pieces of the telephone pole hit the door that you see in the foreground and just wiped out this particular building. Fortunately, it wasn't occupied at the time. This is a typical result of a hurricane, and could be a tornado as well, but in this case it was a hurricane. Just blow the roof completely off the building. This case, it's a residence. The entire roof is gone. Open the entire 2nd floor to the wind and the rain. Our job is to not only evaluate the damage, but help look for survivors and occasionally people that didn't survive. Not a fun activity. Actually downright scary sometimes, but it's interesting. Another image. This small house was not occupied at the time. It blew the house apart, but you can see the couch is still there. And just to the left side of the couch in this image, there's actually a glass curio cabinet, and none of the glass is broken. This is the problem in Lake Charles, Louisiana. It was hit by 2 hurricanes, and even these massive high-tension power lines were snapped off at the bottom. As we drove through this town during and after the event, we were just literally dodging electric lines, television lines, every kind of cable imaginable was laying pretty much everywhere we could possibly go. There were crews of line workers with the bucket trucks. In several parking lots, we counted over 100 bucket trucks each evening parked, waiting to go back out the next day. And that's in multiple parking lots. This is a picture of an apartment complex with over 300 apartments. The roofs were blown off of every single building, destroying every single apartment. They literally evacuated the whole complex, put a fence around it, and they had to go in and gut every single building. This is Hurricane Florence in North Carolina. Everything that this family owned is out there alongside the road. You can see hardwood flooring, desk chair, obviously, totally wiped out the inside of the house. One small spot of the roof blows off, and the wind is so powerful, it takes the rest of the roof with it. If you look close at this picture, you can see the water line on the pillars of this house. Where I'm standing to take the picture, that would be over my head, and behind me, opposite of where the house is, the surface of the lake is another 15 feet below me. So it went up 15 feet to get where I'm at, and an additional probably 12 feet to get to that house. This is all storm surge. Hurricane Florence in North Carolina, that's what's left of a baby grand piano. Heartbreaking, no? This is the recent flood in Worcester, Ohio, where you see in the foreground that rectangular space is where that trailer in the background started out at the beginning of the night. The gentleman who's on the right side of the two people was in the trailer at the time. The flash flood picked it up, shoved it sideways over into those trees. This is the interior of that trailer. And again, he was inside when it happened. This is a typical search and rescue scenario. This was Kent, Ohio. There was a young girl that was missing. Her parents had a tracker on her cell phone and tracked her to where it says Crooked River Images at the top of the screen right here. This whole area, can you see my cursor moving? I'm assuming yes.
Yes. Yes.
This whole area is a park. When she went missing, her parents tracked her car down, and they found her car parked in this parking lot with her purse, her cell phone, her wallet, and her car keys locked in the trunk. The police department and fire department immediately did a search of the area and could find nothing. They called us the second day of the search, and we went in with our search dogs. They keyed on where her car had been parked immediately. And they went around the car, noting that she had been there, but when we got 6 or 8 feet away from the car, there was no trace of her. We're thinking immediately this is a kidnapping. But our job in this particular case was to search this entire area along the Cuyahoga River and Haymaker Parkway and ensure that she wasn't here. When we were finished 2 days later, we notified the police department, and they conducted a search, a forensic search with the U.S. Marshals of her cell phone. And they found that she had been contacted by someone in Cincinnati, a young man, and they tracked that young man to his house, and she had been trafficked. Fortunately, she was still there. She had not been picked up by the individual that had bought that girl. And while we're on this subject, Northeast Ohio is one of the highest trafficked areas in the country for young kids. The U.S. Marshal Service has recovered over 100 young kids just in the past 4 or 5 months, simply missing from Northeastern Ohio. This is Perry Township up in Northeastern Ohio, up near Cleveland. And in the center, you can see Evergreen Farms. We were called in because there was a despondent young man that drove along this tree line. There's not really a dirt road, but there's a kind of an opening, drove along this tree line and crashed his truck into the trees right here. When we got there, the police and fire department had done a search, and they told us that they had canvassed this whole area around here, and there was absolutely no sign of anybody there. So they wanted us to search way out here. in these areas. And we did. We were working from here. We went out into those far areas. This is the area that the police department and the fire department and the search dogs originally searched. And we found, unfortunately, the young man in a tree right there. So what's happening quite frequently in our state is that people go out and really don't understand search and rescue. They don't understand lost person behavior. And it's not until a couple of days later that they finally give up and call us to come in and help them. This was a very unfortunate thing. He was suicidal. He was addicted to meth, and it was a bad outcome from our perspective. Here's another image. This particular one was in Medina, and this was an elderly man who had dementia. He'd gone out from a house right here in the upper left-hand corner. He'd gone out to get the mail, and he never came back. When we arrived to this house, and I'll show you this in a close-up in a minute, the emergency management agency was there. Search and rescue for Medina, police and fire department was there. There were probably a good 100 people out searching for this elderly man. And unfortunately, they couldn't find him. One of the first things I asked when I arrived at this house, is there water nearby? And the EMA person that was there, emergency management person that was there to coordinate the search said, no, there's no water nearby. And I said, well, based on lost person behavior, this is a man with dementia. It's relatively cool outside. He's not dressed for the weather. He's not going to be far. We're going to find him within 200 or 300 yards of this house. No, absolutely not. We have searched this entire area and could not find that man. All right, so here we go again. They had us out here searching way out here. This guy could barely walk. He's 2/3 blind. How could he possibly get this far? At one point, they even had us going out across State Route 71 looking for him on the east side of State Route 71. One of the things with dementia people is that they will walk until they run into a barrier and they will stop. They won't turn. They won't go backwards. They'll just stop there. And unfortunately, the barrier is quite frequently water, and that usually leads to a bad outcome. Had that man made it all the way to 71, there's no way he would have crossed that road. He was incapable. But they had everybody out here searching. We kept telling them, guys, he's going to be in this area. Here's the house. Here's the pond that didn't exist behind the house. And we spent a great deal of time searching that because, of course, it didn't exist. And, of course, the EMA guy was right out here in front of the house. What are you doing? We also started down this grass lane with the search dogs and bounced in and out of the woods, checking to see if there was a ground scent. There was no ground scent. We moved out around the lower area here, and even to the left to this point, didn't see anything. We moved out into this field, moved around the field in they call it purposeful wandering, looking for any kind of track that might have been, somebody had gone through the field. At this point right here, I noticed there was a track going this way, just of broken bushes, grass bent over, and just looked to me like something was going on. But we were recalled back to the house by the police department. It's dark. They've been searching this entire area with a helicopter with infrared and thermal imaging. They haven't been able to spot a thing. We finally got the police department to line up here. Whoops, sorry, backwards. To line up along this field and literally walk the field 8 feet apart. We found him right here, less than 300 yards from the house. He was beat up, he was scratched, he was just really in bad shape, but he was conscious, he could talk to us, and we brought him out, and that's me standing at the, with my back to the camera at the ambulance. We brought him out, put him in the ambulance, and he survived it just fine. It's another thing we do. We harvest marijuana. Unfortunately, we're harvesting it for the state security forces in the cornfields in and around northeastern Ohio. They come out with their helicopter and they inspect the cornfield, and when they see marijuana plants, we immediately go out into the cornfield and cut the plants down and put them in the truck and send them out to be burnt. Yes, it all goes out to be burnt. We don't keep any of it. The interesting part is, and here's where the training comes into play, there are booby traps in the corn. So when we go out through the corn, we have to be looking for razor blades, trip wires, pretty much any kind of booby trap you can think of.
Jeez. Warfare in our land.
What's that?
Warfare in our land. Sorry.
I still can't tell what you're saying. Sorry. Type it up to the comments and I'll get back to you on it. How's that sound? This is a picture that I took, and Brian was laughing at me the whole time I was out here. I was at New Mexico Tech University in Albuquerque, well, south of Albuquerque, New Mexico. One of the things that we do is we have to know about hazmat. We have to know about chemical, biological, nuclear warfare, understand what a meth lab looks like and the step to take when we encounter a meth lab. And one of the courses we take is knowing and understanding explosives that are used by suicide bombers and radical, and I won't say leftists. So I spent some time out there looking at explosives. These are two of the examples. On the right side is a pressure cooker explosive device. This is exactly the kind of explosive device that was used at the Boston Marathon. On the left side is an explosive panel concealed inside a notebook computer. And you can see the inert sign. These are all inert, but we literally go through the different ways that people can hide explosives. We talk about the standoff areas and where security and rescue forces need to be if one of these things is found. We also go out onto their test site and we experience about 40 different types of explosions, right up to an 800-pound car bomb. This is why we do what we do. There are people out there that need the help, that can't get the help, they can't help themselves. And the only way they can find help is if we can get there to help them out. Again, sometimes it comes out as a bad result, and sometimes it comes out as a good result. Our best bet in search and rescue is if we can manage to practice for months on end without being called out. We call that successful. That means nobody has gotten lost and we haven't had to try and save anybody from themselves. This is the Ohio Emergency Management Facility in Columbus. This is where all of the natural disasters or disasters, period, in the state of Ohio are managed at the state level. We have a disaster facility at the sheriff's office out on Route 62. There's a command center out there as well. In this particular instance, we are training to operate drones during disaster events for search and rescue and for observation and exploration of a disaster zone. We can even attach a life jacket to a drone and fly it out into a water or ice rescue scenario and drop it to somebody in that area to help them get out of where they're trapped. So what do? Brian mentioned we are a FEMA ESF 9 search and rescue team. ESF 9 is emergency support function. It's just one of a group of teams that FEMA uses in their incident command center to coordinate specific activities within the disaster area. We work with Ohio, the Emergency Management Association, for both training and activations, including tabletop exercises. We work through and are certified through the National Association for Search and Rescue, as well as the Mountain Rescue Association. 2 years ago, I went to the National Land Search and Rescue School, which is managed and delivered by the United States Air Force and the Coast Guard. The Air Force is technically responsible for all land searches in the country, in the continental United States. The Coast Guard is responsible for all waterborne searches, and they do allow or allocate that responsibility out to the local organizations. ASTM is the standards, international standards. 2209 is the global standard for search and rescue. Our training includes, at the minimum, over 100 training courses that we have to go through in order to be credentialed. Some of those courses are available online. Some of them we have to go out and actually be in the field to do them. The online programs, we run through the actual training, and then we go out into the field and use that training. We have credentialed and experienced search and rescue teams. We have over 70 people in our organization. We reach the entire state of Ohio. We have credentialed canine search teams, air, ground, and water sensing. Air sensing, they can just tell if somebody's in the area. Ground sensing, they can actually trace the person by their scent on the ground. And water sensing, believe it or not, they can smell someone underwater by the bubbles that are coming up. Usually that's not a happy coincidence. Drone observation for search and rescue. Rope rescue teams, we do a lot of rope work. Disaster damage assessment. We have 2 command and control operational systems that we have that are built into trailers, where we can actually roll into a disaster site and pick up and manage the entire environment. We coordinate and manage volunteer searchers. Not long ago, we ran a search in Uniontown where a young woman had gone missing, and she was a runaway. She was upset with her parents, and she was hiding from the police. When we got there, the police department was searching for her in police cars and fire department SUVs. Well, guys, if she doesn't want to be seen by the police and you roll through the neighborhood in a police car, I don't think you're going to find her. We had to explain this, but eventually what we did, we ended up with over 200 volunteers in this particular event, and we literally surrounded the area where this girl could possibly be, and we just tightened the noose. We contained her, tightened the noose on her, and she finally appeared walking to the search command center and said that she just couldn't hide from us anymore. There wasn't any place left to hide. We also provide force multiplier services for the authorities. That simply means when they're out there and they can't do the search themselves, we're there to help them with it. We don't replace them. They're still in charge. But what we do is we multiply their force. We get out there and we do the search according to lost person behavior or according to the National Infrastructure for Search and Rescue. The scary part is that typical fire departments and police departments are not really searched or trained in search and rescue. They have a basic element of search and rescue, but if you go out and you look at some of the fire department search and rescue scenarios, they search burning buildings, which is great, and that's what they're good at. But they're not so good at going out in the woods and looking for, trace evidence of someone having passed through the woods or the fields. The same is true for police department. On the Medina search, we had policemen out there in their uniforms, leather shoes, walking through the woods, trying to negotiate creeks and swamps and everything else. And we had firemen in their turnout coats, their turnout clothing. It's just not conducive to conducting a search. So we can get in there and help them and run through an effective search and rescue operation so that we can find the individual or individuals and get them out and start taking care of them from the time we find them. And this is unusual. It's believe it or not, a problem in the state. So that's what I have to tell you. Now, Who's got questions?
All right, so this is Bill. Let me let everybody know, you will have to unmute personally in order to ask that question. I'm going to start off with one question. You mentioned training a lot, and I just want to know is first off, what kind of training did you go through, and is this something that you can continually do in your experience?
Right.
That's a great question. What kind of training do we go through? And I'm assuming you're asking how difficult is it? Go ahead and nod. That's good. I like that. All right. So the training we go through, and when I have a recruit that wants to join, I literally tell them you do not have to be Superman or Superwoman. We do not run 5 miles every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we don't lift weights every single day. But we do have to take a basic physical training program, relatively easy. Get on your exercise bike and ride 3 miles. You're done. You're in good shape. What we do most often, we walk in the woods, but it's purposeful walking. It's walking and paying attention to everything around us. It's called the searcher's cube. We have been trained to look for evidence. And one of the training things that I do with my teams is I take a bunch of used, old, ugly pennies, and I take them out and I throw them on a blacktop, the blacker the better, parking lot. And then I make them go look for them, because that's looking for clues. And believe it or not, it's hard to find dark pennies on a blacktop parking lot. So that's some of the training. Some of the training is a little bit difficult. The SARTEC 2 search and rescue program, which is one of the better programs, you do have to go out in the woods. You do have to navigate with a compass. Not allowed to use a GPS. You have to use a compass and a map. So yeah, it can get stressful, but just about anybody can do it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And again, if anybody else has a question, you do have to hit the microphone to unmute.
Thanks, Bill.
So the map reading, you're using like terrain maps with contour lines and all that kind of thing?
We're using a software program called SARTOPO, SARTOPO, which we can, in our command trailer, we can bring that right up and work live off of the map and actually document exactly where we've been and how well we search a given area. Even our dogs wear GPS trackers so that we can actually show exactly where the dog worked in an area. So it's what's really amazing, and this usually blows away the police or fire department when they come into our command trailers. We can literally document that to an 80% accuracy rate, that person is not in this particular acre.
That's cool.
So this is Bill again. So is this like all volunteer, or is there compensation, or what other than the experience you get from the searches? Is there anything else you get out of it?
Absolutely nothing. This is all volunteer. We're a 501c3. We're self-supporting. We generally spend individually, depending on how deeply you want to get into this program, you can spend anywhere from $300 to several $1,000s on equipment. But the average cost to belong to the organization is only $50 a year. Nothing. You've got an additional $50 to belong to the National Search and Rescue, and an additional $15 to belong to the Mountain Search and Rescue. But essentially, not a lot of equipment, not a lot of expense. We rely on donations to build our equipment out. There's equipment that we use personally that we buy, and then there's team equipment, and that is purchased through our budget.
So Al, when you go out to like the hurricane, that kind of thing, does FEMA supply you or give you kind of substance or something to live on while you're out there?
When I go out, you're breaking up, Brian. I'm sorry. When I go out for the hurricanes, I usually go out through either American Red Cross or through Team Rubicon. And American Red Cross literally pays for my trip to get there. They'll fly me into the local airport and will rent me a car. And I work out of a shelter, just like the people who have been rescued from the disaster. I stay in the shelter just like they do. And off we go. That answer your question?
Yep, it did. Thanks.
Good question.
Hi, this is Maureen. I have a question about, since you're talking to Lions Club International is known for disaster response. Do you have any advice to us if we have a disaster in our area and the Lions as an organization wants to help? How would you suggest we get started?
You're bouncing around too. I'm sorry. I think a lot of it is here in Louisville. Spectrum doesn't seem to want to give us a decent reception on our internet. I think you asked, do I have insights on local disasters?
How Lions can help, if there's something that we could do, or training we could do to help.
Training you can do to help.
Yeah.
Okay. There is actually a program out there called CERT, Community Emergency Response Teams. There are a grand total of 3 of them in Ohio. And the reason there are only 3 of them in Ohio is because they can't keep people on the teams. The reality is that organized law enforcement agencies having jurisdiction is what they call them, don't particularly like volunteers. Excuse me. So they want to keep the volunteers out of the search areas. In terms of what you might do is get awareness of disaster preparation. Floods, for instance, are the most common disaster in the state of Ohio. And a flood can take out your heat, it can take out your water, it can take out your electricity. You need to have at least 72 hours of food and water stored in your house. We recommend more than that, a lot more than that. Personally, I do have a pretty good supply of food and water. Don't come to my house in a disaster. You won't get in. But
Thanks.
You too, Brian. But realistically, that's the best thing you can start doing is start a family plan for disaster response. Have what they call go bags. And in a go bag for every person in the family, you should have food and clothing for 3 days minimum. And it should be a bag that is always kept packed, always ready to go. And you grab it and you go out the door and you take your pets with you. That's one of the best things you can possibly do in terms of disasters.
So maybe an education day you guys put on for somebody?
Yeah, that's an education day. If you want to go through on doing that, I can help you with that too. Don't go out and buy those freeze-dried meals. They're expensive. And whatever you do, if you decide to buy a big bag of rice, don't buy brown rice because it ferments. You have to get the white rice.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could pass that along. I'll also mention that in our website, just to say, something you highly recommend is the to-go bag and what to go in it. I think that would be something that we could share with a lot of people.
What's interesting is that the Church of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, they practically expect their members to have as much as a year's supply of food and water for their family stored. And it's almost 100% in terms of the Mormon Church.
Interesting.
I don't know what they know that we don't.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for Al?
If you have questions down the road, just give them to Brian. He'll give them to me, and I'll get back to you.
Well, thank you, Al, very much for doing that. I appreciate it very much. We always give our speakers a little lion statue. I'll get you yours.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. See you later.
Bye,
Thank you.
Al.
Thank you. We
Bye.
enjoyed it.
Thank you, Al. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.